Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Furman. Welcome to Vox Novus, the new voice. Is it possible to transmute our consciousness to infinite potential using consciousness first instead of mindset first? My guest this week on Vox Novus, Howard Falco, is a renowned mindset and empowerment expert turned consciousness expert whose work has impacted thousands. Author of 3 books, his most recent book, Invincible, The Mindset of Infinite Potential and the Secret to Inevitable Success, is changing the game on how we can all reach our infinite potential by connecting to our higher consciousness first. What was a moment in time when he questioned his very existence, he incidentally connected to his own higher consciousness himself. And he spelled out his steps of mastering this state so that you can overcome anything and have the life you love. He has worked as a mental strength coach and performance specialist with college and professional athletes, teams and coaches to help them achieve breakthroughs and championships, CEOs, and people from all walks of life. His website is howardfalco.com, and he joins me this week to share his amazing path. Please join me in welcoming to Vox Novus Howard Falco. Welcome, Howard.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you, Victor.
Nice to meet you too, sir. Howard, please share with us your upbringing and what happened when you were 14 that planted the seeds for your later discoveries.
Well, I was brought up in the suburbs of Chicago. To 2 wonderful parents who were great people, but couldn't get along and couldn't stay married. So they ultimately ended up divorcing, which kind of had an impact on me as far as what I wanted for my life and started the questioning I had about existence and happiness and the things we ask when we experience things that we don't like in the world. And then I had a profound moment at 14, the first time I was taken on a camping trip away from the Chicago city lights. My aunt and uncle and cousin took me on a trip up to northern Minnesota. We were less than 100 miles from the Canadian border. It was about a 10-hour car ride. And when we got there, we had this beautiful wooden cabin on a lake with a creaky old dock, a boat dock with a small boat, and it was something like almost out of a novel that you would imagine. And everybody went into the cabin, kind of put their clothes away for the night and unpacked and kind of settled in. And at 14, I wanted to explore. And so I went out the cabin door and went down to the dock and just peered into the darkness. And that's when it started. The first thing that hit me was the oxymoron of the sound of silence. I had never in my life experienced any lack of sound like that in nature that far away. And the second thing that happened was, as I'm looking out at this very still and placid lake, I saw what looked like light shining up from one area of the lake. And then I looked and they were in another area. And as I scanned the entire lake, I noticed that these lights were shining up from every single part of it. And for a split second, Victor, I did not know what was going on. And then I tilted my chin and my eyes to the sky. And in that moment, everything changed for me. It was a breathtaking moment. The breath left my lungs. I was awestruck. Actually, I was starstruck, excuse the pun. And I looked up and couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I just lay down on the dock for what seemed like hours and just put my hands behind my head and simply marveled. And in that moment, hundreds of existential questions filled my mind about the nature of life, existence, meaning, and purpose. And it set me on this path at that age to discover these answers to these deeper questions I had about what we're doing here, what the purpose of life is, where meaning comes from, where happiness comes from, et cetera, et cetera. And that started me on the journey.
And from that point forward, did you find yourself stargazing all the time?
I never passed up a moment to look up at the night sky. So I would often look up and wonder, and it would sort of reignite those questions that I had about existence. But it was more, I was on this incredible path to find out or to achieve this state of happiness. The divorce of my parents sort of shook me where I was like, I don't want to, I want to experience something better than that sort of chaos. Not that they weren't great parents, it's just, I wanted to experience love. I wanted to experience life. And I had a list in mind of what it would take that I thought to achieve happiness. And so I started to check things off the list. The problem was I wasn't getting any closer to that sense of peace. And that's what really scared me as I went forward.
Now we jump ahead to when you were 35, living what most would see as the American dream. What
hmm
happened that changed your life?
I guess I thought, okay, I fell in love. I got married. I had two kids. Put myself through college. I got a degree. I got in the business I wanted to. I started to make money. I bought a home. That was keeping me going. And then as I started to look at the list, there were less things to check off, and yet there was this there was this unease that was still there. And one of the last things on the list was millions of dollars, because that's what the American dream says will make you happy. And then one day, what happened, Victor, was I was walking through my home, and all of a sudden it hit me. I'm working with people that have more money than they're going to know what to do with for the rest of their life, and many of these people are not happy at all. They're miserable. And I realized that the last thing I had on my list, as far as happiness goes, was not an answer. And when that happened, I was out of answers, and that shook me to my core because for the first time in my life, I didn't know. And so I got on my knees and I reached up to the sky and I just said, universe, God, life, source, whatever it is that is part of all this creation, I need to understand more. I need to have answers at this point. I don't know how I'm going to go on. And I can see where this all leads. This wheel leads to it. It's a never ending wheel that leads to pain and suffering. So I need to know the answers to these bigger questions. And I asked it with a deep and guttural yearning. And then I let it go. And 2 weeks later, I was in this seminar I'd read a book on the psychology of trading markets, thought it was an interesting angle. And the instructor, there was about 20 people in the class. And he was talking about the nature of making a trade in the financial markets and how you decide when you get in, when you get out, how much, what vehicle you get into, what vehicle you get out of. You're creating the whole experience. And something upon those words hit me where I realized that I wasn't doing this just in the financial markets, but this is the way that I was creating my entire life. And in that moment, for the first time, I realized that the control on the experience that I was looking for was on the inside, not on things on the outside. And that gave me this great sense of relief. I felt like I had found a door or a window in what was formerly a doorless or windowless room. And it allowed me to take a collective breath. I didn't know how I was going to do it yet, but I knew I could. And the second thing that hit me that really accelerated the process was I had realized that I had asked these deep questions a couple weeks ago, and I connected the dots and I thought, wow, this isn't a coincidence. This is life bringing me the right information at the right time to begin the process of these answers. And I saw that this was happening. This is what existence is here for. It's here to help us expand our awareness. And that sent me into a state of joy and awe again and mindfulness that I went into each day with, like a little child, almost like, where's my insight going to come from today? Where is my information, my understanding? And I was wide eyed every day until 6 months later when I had the grand experience, when time sort of collapsed. But that's what kicked it off at 35.
From my personal experience, I look back at my mid to late 30s and call that time chapter two. Is there
Mm.
something about that time in life that opens us up to new discoveries?
Oh, absolutely. I think, when before we turn 16, 17, we're still under the sort of control and guidance of our parents' belief systems, our personal experiences, maybe some genetic implications of how we think and feel. And we start to, around 17, 18, we start to have our own thoughts and our own ideas and open our mind up. And ask questions and start to find our own individual identity. That's why college is such an exploratory time, or post high school is such an exploratory time. And then when it gets to 35, I think that's a tipping point where your beliefs either settle in or your mind stays open. And so it's a very ripe period right before either you go into sort of accepting what you believed, or you hit the questioning reaches a crescendo. And that's why I think the 30s are a very ripe time for a greater spiritual experience, or before that, somewhere between 17 and mid to late 30s.
Tell us about that major opening that took place for you.
For 6 months, I had been asking questions. And then, like a few days later, a song would come on the radio that I'd heard hundreds of times before. And for the first time, I heard a new layer and a new message in the same song that's been played to me. Or a conversation, a random conversation with a stranger at a grocery store would bring up this beautiful synchronicity and create an insight and understanding. So the window between question and answer was starting to close. In December of 2002, I was sitting in my office, and all of a sudden, it was like I got tapped on the very center of the top of my forehead with a great insight, and I wrote it down. And I just knew it to be true. And before I could even get the pen to the end of the sentence, another one hit. And the way I explained it in the book is like when it rains and the first raindrop hits your head, you don't know what's going on. You think it's maybe a bird, you're not sure what's happening yet. And before you know it, you're like, oh, it's raining. And another drop hits and another drop. So I'm writing these notes down, and they started coming in faster and faster. And finally, I just put the pen down. I couldn't write that fast. I had no idea what was going on. I just got up. I told my partner I have to leave. I got in my car. I ended up at the public library where I live in Scottsdale, Arizona, and got out and just followed my feet, Victor, to the spirituality, philosophy, psychology, and religious sections of the library, and just started to pull whatever book looked like it was sticking out to me. And I took a stack of about 10 of them to a back cubby. I'll never forget this. And I put them down. I opened the first book, was the complete works of Freud, something I'd never read before, or maybe in my freshman year psychology class did a little reading on Freud. Opened it up, put my finger down, and it was as if I had read this for years, understood it, could teach it. It was crazy. I shut the book. I opened another book on Confucius. Top 10 things, like two or three was the one that I had written down earlier in my office. And then I'm really starting to wonder what's going on. And then there was a New Testament. I opened it to a parable. I saw the parable. I saw how it's been taught for years. And then I saw a little bit of a deeper meaning in it. And at that point, I hit the ground in a state of complete and utter humility that still brings up emotion to this day, and thought to myself, well, my life has changed. Well, first, actually, that first question was, who the heck am I? Some guy in the middle of, suburban Phoenix with this type of insight. And was I going crazy? Anyway, I finally realized that I was going to just be a good servant of this for the rest of my life. It took me about a year to get my arms around the magnitude and to put it out into something that was structured, that could be taught, or people could read in a way that would be digestible in terms of an understanding of these insights for hopefully help them answer some of their questions in life. And that's how my first book, I Am, was born. I left my work in the financial business, and I've been teaching and speaking and writing since.
May I ask, what was the song that you heard in a different way that opened you?
There were several songs, but the biggest one, the one that still shakes me to my core in the best of ways, was Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin. Because it's a song about awakening. It's a song about enlightenment. And even down to a verse where the exact thing happened to me. I mean, to a T. If there's a bustle in your hedgerow, don't be alarmed now. It's just a spring clean for the May Queen. And a bustle in the hedgerow is a funny feeling in the head. And I had this feeling in my forehead that I'd never experienced before this happened. And it was very strange. Don't be alarmed now. It's a spring clean for the May Queen. The May Queen is a day of rebirth in England. And it was certainly the precursor to my rebirth.
Beautiful. I had a similar experience. I'm a bit older than you. I had a similar experience with the song Question by the Moody Blues, which I first heard when I was 17 years old back in
Wow.
1970. And the lyrics to that were life changing for me and perhaps planted my seeds on my future path, where it says, and when you stop and think about it, you won't believe it's true that all the love you've been giving has all been meant for you. I'm looking for
Oh,
someone to change
beautiful.
my life. I'm looking for a miracle in my life. And if you could see what it's done to me, to lose the love I knew, could safely lead me to a land that I once knew, to learn as we grow old the secrets of our soul. It was engraved in my heart when I heard it.
Absolutely beautiful. Yeah, identical experience. Wow, beautiful.
Thank you. Many of the events and changes that we mutually experienced are called synchronicity, which is meaningful coincidences without causal connection. What do you attribute this to?
Intention, timing, divine timing with intention, readiness. The universe is very exact. And so when you intend something and you're willing to move closer and closer and keep putting the conditions together and keep demonstrating that intent, eventually you cross path with enough of the conditions. And that's what I believe a coincidence is, two angles that are coinciding in an exact form at an exact time.
And in my experience, every time a coincidence, a synchronicity presented itself to me, I had three choices. I could dismiss it out of hand. I could say yes, but perhaps later. Or I could say yes with a capital Y. And every time I used that capital Y, the next one would come and the next one would come. And it set
Mm-hmm.
the pattern for my life.
Mm, beautiful. Yeah, I think when we open to and we're ready to receive, when we have that space, when we say, I don't know, and humble ourselves, the universe acts like a vacuum and it hates a vacuum and immediately seeks to fill that space. Or our mind acts like a vacuum, I should say, absorbing wisdom that's been here or is waiting for us.
Absolutely. How did this experience open you to working with professional athletes and teams?
That's a great question. So when this happened to me, um, the first thought was, okay, is this it? Do I just shave my head, put a robe on, disappear on a mountain, disconnect from everything? And while I had a thought of that, I thought, I love my family, my marriage, etc. I'm enjoying. I'm coaching club baseball. Why can't this be brought into mainstream? So when I wrote I Am, I wrote it as openly as I could. I tried to be careful with a lot of deeply esoteric language so that it couldn't be boxed or categorized. It would just simply approach the ego in the most powerful way possible for the person reading it. And I thought I'd love to be able to expand mainstream's appetite and interest in this work since I'm a regular, everyday sort of guy. And the way life responded, which kind of surprised me because I was already working with people in relationships, spiritual quest, depression, anxiety, was I started getting calls from professional athletes who said, I read your book, I Am, and this is what happened in my performance. Do you work with athletes? And growing up, I had played every sport. I have intimate knowledge of the sports. I know how to speak to athletes. And so it was a very easy transition. And I started working with them in almost every collegiate sport and several professional sports. So it was interesting to take this work into those areas.
Before we discuss your latest book, Invincible, The Mindset of Infinite Potential and the Secret to Inevitable Success, let's talk about that first book, I Am, The Power of Discovering Who You Really Are. What inspired that book and what did you share with readers?
So what inspired the book was that moment back in 2002 where not all the answers, because I'll never say I have them all. I am constantly a student and open to more insight and understanding. But that moment answered many of 99% of the deep questions I had about life and the universe. And so I wanted to put it in a structure that could be absorbed in a way that would help people transform and expand their consciousness. And that's how I wrote I Am. What you are, how you are, why you are, and who you can be. So that's what inspired me to write the book, the understanding of energy and matter, how it comes together, the understanding of our psychology, and how we develop an identity, and how identity is so important to what we attract into our life, to how we respond, to how we perceive the world, and really all the main ingredients that shape our reality, for the effort of people to gain control over that narrative of I am. So that's what really prompted me to write the book. And, I just put my head down and just started writing and didn't stop for about a year and a half.
And the concept of I am obviously comes from the biblical concept when Moses is receiving the Ten Commandments from the burning bush. And he asks the name of who he is speaking to, and he's told, I am that I am. Is that the reference here?
From a universal perspective, or from what your definition of divinity or God is, yes. What is not God? The good, the bad, the ugly, it's all part of the contrast that we need to create reality and to help us on our journey and our evolution of understanding and consciousness. On an individual basis, that I am is for each piece of matter in existence to decide what we or it wants to be, right? So a rock has a certain molecules and atoms that are spinning at a certain frequency and rate that keeps it as a rock. And the reason it has a will or an I amness to it is because when you try and pick up the rock and break it in half, it will have a certain amount of resistance to stay as it is. An animal, another level of it, and certainly a human, as us as human beings, with the ability to self-reflect and change that narrative at any time as we continue to evolve and develop in who we want to be in the world in this form. So yes, each thing has its own I amness to it. And I would say a human being is the pinnacle in terms of the ability to self-reflect and take control of that narrative, because the world is always putting its narrative out, or other people are always putting their narrative out. And I think that's what creates a lot of suffering, is that people get affected and drawn into other people's energy, other people's identities of who they want to be. But realizing that you have control of your own experience is so incredibly liberating. And so to know that you have control over how you're going to define, declare, and demonstrate who you want to be is an incredible point of awakening on the journey.
My guest is Howard Falco. We're going to be talking about his new book, Invincible, The Mindset of Infinite Potential and the Secret to Inevitable Success. Howard, please share with our listeners where they can get all of your books and find out more about you and your wonderful work.
Sure. All the books can be found. You can go to my website, howardfalco.com. They're available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and anywhere books are sold. And of course, my Instagram, you can see what I post on a daily basis, or any other of my social media. And then my foundation, the 8 Wisdom Foundation, which is 8wisdom.org. You can see what I'm doing there with this work.
And we'll be back with more after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
We asked parents who adopted teens to share their journey.
We just kind of knew from the beginning that we were family.
They showcased a sense of love that I never had before. I mean, he's not only my parent, he's like my best friend.
At the end of the day, it's all been worth it. I wouldn't change a thing about our lives.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. Visit adoptuskids.org to learn more. Brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Vox Novus. My guest this week is Howard Falco. We're talking about his new book, Invincible, The Mindset of Infinite Potential and the Secret to Inevitable Success. Congratulations on your new book. What inspired this, and how does it differ from your previous books?
Well, thank you very much for that. So after putting out my first book, I Am, and then the publisher asked me to write a second book, which I wrote on the nature of how time works in our life a few years later, I'd been in the field working for about the last 10 to 12 years since those books were published, and had some amazing experiences, some incredible experiences with athletes having career seasons, miracle plays, winning championships, and some incredible work with individuals that I'm very blessed to have done to help them transcend and transform their life into a better place. And so I thought, if this is happening with the formula in a step-by-step process of how they gain a greater sense of awareness and empowerment over their mind, why not put it in a step-by-step process in a new book? Put all the examples in there and put it out so people can go step by step how the world loves to do it today, to understand how to embrace each part of this process of self-awareness, self-empowerment, and self-understanding. And so that's how Invincible was born.
We both share a poet's soul, and I love how you open each part of Invincible with a poem. Part 1 begins with The Light. Would you share that with us?
I'd be honored to.
Thank you.
The light. I want the light that liberates my soul. I don't care what it reveals, as long as it makes me whole. I want the light that sets me free from the pain I've long carried, finally relieved to be me. I want the light that dissolves my fear, leading me into every moment, open to more love than I can bear. I want the light that unveils my power. I'm ready for a new destiny, for this is my true hour.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
My pleasure.
Part 1 is about the realization that we are connected to the universe or source and have infinite potential. How do we recognize this connection? And is this dependent on a faith foundation?
I think it leads to a faith, and it leads to a foundation of faith. But how we recognize it is, I give the very straightforward and powerful example of looking up at the stars at night, and even going a step further and looking at some of these images that the Hubble, which launched in the late 90s, and the James T. Webb telescope have brought back to us after going deeper and deeper into mind-boggling distances to bring back these unbelievable images of creation and expansion in a universe that doesn't end. And so the idea is, if we can't find an end to the universe, then there is no beginning. And that's one where the mind has a big problem with, because the mind is geared towards boundary. It wants to know where there's a beginning and an end. But I see a universe without beginning and without end. And if we're part of this universe, this infinitely creative universe, then that means we're endowed with that same infinite creative ability. And that's what I'm offering the reader in step 1, is to realize that you have infinite potential within you to create what you want. Many people, when you ask them, what do you believe is possible in the world, they will say, well, anything. But the minute you say, well, what do you think is possible for you? That's where the boundary comes in. That's where the limitation comes in. And so the offering in step 1 is to see the expanse of that you are no different from the universe that you're in terms of your potential and the possibility that's here for you. And that's where we start this book on invincibility.
So this manifests in our self-awareness and change of our understanding of who we truly are.
Correct. That's exactly right. And that's why step 2 goes into understanding your identity. How genetics and environment formed who you were, but not who you are. So the idea is to be able to look back and see how the construction of your life came together, and to do this without any guilt or shame or regret, but just as an observer, looking at how your personal experiences, the way that you were nurtured and conditioned as a young child, or when you were born, how long you cried in the crib, when you got fed, and just how it's created a set point for the way that you look at the world. The sneaky part of identity is genetics, because I don't believe that it's just hair color and eye color that gets passed on, but the way that we associate, perceive, and react to our world is also a part of our genetics. And it's important to understand that so that when you have behaviors that sort of surprise you or instincts and you wonder where that came from, you can know that it's something that's been passed on. But the first step to changing the genetic expression, which is the field of epigenetics, is awareness. You have to know what the instinct is in order to catch it and reroute it until it becomes the new normal, until you've changed that expression. So understanding your identity is a huge part of step 2. And then that leads you into step 3, which is how you direct your moment by moment reality, your ego, which is designed to do that, so that you can begin to send out a different frequency of energy, different responses, and you can seed the ground in front of you with a different intention or different actions that help to germinate a new reality or push that needle of probability, as I say, towards the germination and the creation of what you intend.
You know, it's interesting. My childhood relationship with my father engendered the sense that if you take care of others, you will be loved. I never really felt loved by my father until I started becoming part of his caretaking team when he turned ill when I was 8 years old. I became a people pleaser following this, ultimately resulting in my own health issues being neglected. And this led to an awakening in my 50s and the creation of healthy boundaries. I understood that it was okay to say no when my energy was being usurped and to only say yes when appropriate. And if you'll allow me, this inspired a poem. I'd like to share it with you. It's called The Healing Power of No. A time comes for choosing rather than losing the essence that makes us so. And in the bestowing, there's power in knowing the freedom that comes with no. When said with compassion, not angry in fashion, and letting the self-love flow, there's a sense of renewing and deep soul imbuing the awareness that comes with no. So with gentle voice and the power of choice and the courage to make it so, I'm still here, my friends. There's no means in this end, just the healing that comes with no.
Wonderful. Very, very nice. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's beautiful. And that's the idea, is to get to a place of self-honor and self-respect and self-love where you realize that you've given yourself enough of your own love that you don't need to fear that you won't get it in the world unless you submit yourself to simple service, in lieu of your own health, in lieu of your own state of mind.
Is it possible for anyone to break away from limiting thought and make the transition moving from I can't to I am?
Absolutely. That's the whole point. And millions have done it. Millions that didn't believe they could do something, changed their attitude, persisted, kept going and kept putting the conditions together until there was a final breakthrough. I think a lot of times in science, we see this. I think it was Jonas Salk who said that, who found the vaccine for polio and said, this was simply a matter of continuing to try different formulas, a matter of persistence and the accretion of insight and understanding until there was a breakthrough. So any breakthrough in science or medicine or sports, business comes from that process of turning I can't into I can. Reminds me of the childhood book by Waddy Piper, The Little Engine That Could. Where I think I can into
I know I can. I know I can.
There you go. I actually use that example in I Am of that beautiful book. So yeah, that's the power of it. But that's the faith, right? That's where faith comes from in an infinitely creative universe. But it has to be combined with the awareness, and most importantly, the worth. The individual has to feel the worth to overcome the fear of change, to feel worthy of putting the conditions together and all the joy it's going to bring. And that's been an interesting one as I've been out on the journey for the last 25 years, is how many have not felt worthy.
And how may we navigate past setbacks with peace of mind and trust in the process?
The trust is that nothing in the universe happens without a reason. And that can be difficult for people that have gone through suffering and grief, myself included. But when you have a kind of the faith in the universe that has birthed you into existence through the cosmos, how do you not trust in the process? in each moment and each experience. And so it helps to reduce resistance and suffering and open up the mind to see what can be learned from these experiences. Let's say there's a terrible breakup in a relationship. There's insight and understanding about connection, intimacy, the ability to nurture a relationship so that it can be everything you want it to be that is in that breakup, that is there. Or maybe it was the wrong person that you tried to force into a situation that just wasn't going to serve your needs, but maybe served loneliness at the time, but not what you really needed. And so there's this growth and this evolution, just to take relationships as one example. But I see this with my athletes all the time. When things don't happen, I know there's information in there that's going to make them better the next time they put themselves in that vulnerable situation on the field. So that's what I would say to when we have a setback or when things don't go our way, is that we can look at it like a scientist putting together an experiment or a formula trying to get it right. It can change the whole experience of life.
I had a wonderful spiritual teacher who used to share that everything is unfolding in divine order and that we may see this with what we call spiritual eyes. Is this view one of the keys to empowerment and invincibility?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because resistance creates pressure, and pressure creates time. If you're resisting what is, you can't learn from what is. You can't see the benefit to you on some level for what is happening. And that doesn't mean you accept or you condone things that are happening that are not aligned with your value system, but you're no longer resisting the truth that for the moment it exists. And that is what gives you the energy and the focus to be able to focus on the creation in the next moment that can lead to changing it. But when you're in denial, you're stuck in time.
Your process unifies teachings from psychology, quantum physics, and spirituality. Please tell us a little about each of these components and how they relate.
Well, the quantum physics, we can look at, obviously, the famous double slit experiment is the one where it showed how and when the formless wave of infinite potential or energy collapses into a particle. And it requires an observer. Why does it require an observer? Because an observer represents consciousness, attention, and intention. And it is intention that causes creativity in the world. Mind has to become matter. The thought of the Great Pyramids turned it into the Great Pyramids over centuries of time, or the Great Wall of China, or any medical breakthrough, or heart transplant. It's consistent intention that puts the conditions together that causes creation. So mind has to become matter. Thought has to turn into reality. I, for identity, has to become am. So that's the quantum physics sort of bridging over into the spiritual aspect. And then there's psychological components in terms of our emotions and the energy that flows through us and how it works in terms of our awareness. Because when we're in an emotional state, we're not in a balanced state. And anytime we're out of balance, the window of perception, the width of it closes in, because the energy of emotion causes us to focus only on what we feel will validate what's causing the emotion. So if we feel angry, we're going to look at the world in a way that validates our anger. If we feel joyful and happy, we're going to look at the world only in a way that validates our joy. And so the widest perception comes at complete balance. That's why meditation, self-reflection, anything to silence the mind opens up that window of perception and awareness. So that's how psychology plays a role in all this.
You say, and I quote, "The intent of the energy behind all matter is to persist and continue to express itself for as long as possible." Please share how we may embrace this concept and grow with it.
So the idea behind that statement is that if there is no beginning and no end, then life is infinite. If life is infinite, then we are trying to express that infinity for as long as we possibly can in a single identity. But ultimately, entropy has to take over and show us that we're not limited or finite in this form, but infinite as well. So it's the heartbeat of going back to the infinite and then the finite, the infinite and the finite, the ocean and the drop, the ocean and the drop. That's the idea behind that statement, is that life is continually trying to persist for as long as it possibly can until that ultimate truth takes over for each individual and each piece of matter. And then again, and again, and again. And it keeps evolving and expanding on each rotation of this incredibly infinite spiral. That's my experience of it.
My guest is Howard Falco. His book, Invincible, The Mindset of Infinite Potential and the Secret to Inevitable Success. We'll be back with more after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of Om Times Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going Om. My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers, pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio.
Hi, this is Bill Maher. I can find humor in almost anything, but one thing I never laugh about is cruelty to animals. If you don't get the joke either, write People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, 501 Front Street, Norfolk, Virginia, 23510.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week is Howard Falco. His book, Invincible, The Mindset of Infinite Potential and the Secret to Inevitable Success. You share that in a society bent on delivering bad news almost daily, we must live with relentless optimism. What are some of the ways in which we may achieve this?
Well, I think to curate information sources and how they affect your mind, getting information or news or understanding without it being produced to you through a certain intention of any particular media source is one way to really take back control. So you get the insight and the information, but you get to decide more of the meaning rather than having the energy coming at you with a certain meaning and intent already attached to it on what it means. It's also people that are around you have certain narratives. They want you to get drawn in sometimes to their dramas and to their side of the story and to what makes sense to them, even though their intent may be still on a subconscious level to be in drama, to be distracted with pain and suffering. So you really have to be mindful of who you are and what you want to achieve in life. That doesn't make you lack empathy, but it helps guard your energy and your state of mind from being pulled in to a negative narrative. And when you stay in a more joyous and positive state of mind, you can be more powerful as a creator in helping shape life the way you want it to go. You still know everything that's going on in life, but you're not going to allow life to take your power away and to take your energy away through putting you in a negative state of mind. That's the idea behind that.
And that leads us to an old expression. What you think of me is none of my business. In this new paradigm that you offer us, how should we relate to the energy of others in terms of their opinion of us?
Well, again, unless it is a close family member or your partner in life who you've decided to take the journey through, you have to have communication and understanding on how someone feels in order to keep that relationship at its finest, at its highest level. Really, nobody else's opinion should matter at all. And if you have trust and faith in who you are, that you're being a good person, you're putting out love every day, you're going into the world with an open mind, then stand in that power. Let them be who they're going to be. And when negativity approaches you, do not let yourself be drawn in. Let the silence speak for itself. And they will either tune to the new energy of you, and actually you'll transform them, or they will remove themselves from your reality. Either way, you're shaping your experience in a way that's more enriching for what you want to create every day. And this takes a daily practice and work. But the more loving, the more accepting you are of yourself, the more empowered you feel to direct life the way you want it to go, which so many people have.
What is the importance of forgiveness, both for self and others, and gratitude in this path?
Oh, those are two big ones. So let me take the forgiveness one first. When you do not forgive yourself, you feel shameful, guilty, or regretful. And those turn into I am statements. I am shameful. I am guilty. I am regretful. And when they're I am statements, your ego has no choice but to find the conditions and the experiences that will allow you to validate that truth. That's how the tail whips you. So the idea is to see that you are not who you were. You are who you decide to be right now. And that version of yourself in the past was the best you had at the time. There is no other truth than that. And if you believe you would have, could have, or should have, you're in denial. And denial creates time. And time creates suffering. So you see the former version. You decide who you want to be today. You forgive yourself in this moment and see the perfection of who you are by doing the work, doing the self-awareness work, reading good material, whether it's mine or anybody else's in the space that's created this type of work on deep self-awareness. And you let the love flow. And as the love flows more, now the bubble of possibility for you in this infinite universe expands, because life cannot give you anything you do not believe yourself worthy of. That's how key it is for you to forgive yourself. Gratitude is helpful anytime you get into a state of mind that's not conducive to creation. Let's say you don't realize it, and 2 days later from now, you're in a negative state of mind. You don't know why. Maybe the world got to you. Maybe someone said something. And all of a sudden you're feeling down. What gratitude does, it's the great reset. It allows you to look at things that you're grateful for in this moment and see the perspective of how much worse it could be that it isn't, and start to be thankful, even if it's for your own breath and your own life. And once you start on that, you can get yourself back to balance, gratitude, and the state of mind that's going to turn things around for you and start to create more positive things in your life. It's when our perspective gets out of whack that gratitude is very important.
And you had talked about self-forgiveness. What about forgiveness for others?
Well, you can't forgive other people if you haven't forgiven your own self. If you judge your own self, you're going to judge others. That's the way you're going to approach the world. So once you forgive your own self and you see the perfection of your own actions up to this point, because you understand how your identity's been constructed, then when you look at other people, you don't judge them anymore. You just see that they're operating out of their own narrative and story, and forgive them, for they know not what they do. They're doing the best that they can. That doesn't mean you have to be affected by them. You can set boundaries. You can change the way you interact with them. You can reroute in some way. But from the standpoint of the way you set eyes upon them, you no longer judge them as people that are not good enough. They're just misunderstood. They've misunderstood their own selves. They've misunderstood the world. They've misunderstood their own power and their own love, and they're acting out of the best of their survival instincts. One of the keys I've given people that have come to see me in counseling, in helping them to look at people with more forgiveness is, especially in couples counseling, is I tell them, look at your wife or look at your husband like looking into the eyes of a scared 5-year-old child. And when you do that, it softens your judgment, and you can see that they're just looking to survive in some way, or they're scared, or they need connection in some way. And so it helps take that judgment off.
You offer many wonderful and meaningful exchanges with clients in your book. What may we learn from those exchanges?
Well, I think that the idea of putting a conversation in the book that flows through each step is so the reader, the client, the so-called client, which is an amalgamation of hundreds of clients, can sort of ask the question that the reader might have to challenge some of the material that they just read. And then there's a response to it. So they can see it in a conversational format that can help them gain an even more enriched understanding of the contents and the formula that was presented to them for acceptance and advancement in the book. So I think the conversation, I loved writing that because it really flowed from so many questions I've gotten over the years from people in relationship to why they should let go of something, or how they take control of the power of I am, or how they feel better about themselves or let love into their life. These are big things for people in terms of change. And so it helps to see it in a conversational format.
How may visualizing our goals as already achieved move us forward on the path?
I think the more you can put a vision around what you want and feel it as something you're comfortable with, the more it slips into your identity as who you are. There's no longer a foreign feeling when it comes to holding up a trophy. Like, I can see myself reading the trophy, holding it up, and knowing that I'm worthy of achieving this. I can see myself in the arms of another, being so connected and so in touch and so trusting and loving with someone. And I can feel that coming. That sends out an energy of who you are and what you want. And again, it's not just what you put out that attracts what you want back, but the universe knows what you believe is true, and it's going to try and help you because it's all about creation and it wants you to create. And so it's going to send you back the truth of what you believe. So the more you visualize, the more you really harness that and absorb that truth into every fiber of who you are, the more it helps you when you go out in the world to bring in those conditions that can give that a greater chance of happening. And I've experienced this so many times in my own life.
Absolutely. What is the connection between our heart and this work? And does the heart-mind connection move us forward?
Oh, that's the biggest, what the longest journey they say is from the head to the heart. Is that right? I think so. So that is such a great question. And one of the biggest points of transformation for an individual. So many people read information from the head only. I did everything I could in Invincible to put love and energy into the flow of this work that helps people feel better about who they are. The more you feel better, the more you let what may have been an uncomfortable feeling of warmth and love flow into your mind. And then as you read the material, it's like this beautiful, like baking a beautiful cake. It's just all the ingredients come together and you start to feel the truth of this more in terms of not only your understanding in your head, but your worthiness is a big part of Invincible. And there's actually a section where you write down what you feel worthy of or a number representing it. And then you go through a process where you learn more of the truth of your infinite worth. If there's a quote I have in I Am that says, if you're in matter, you matter. If you're born into matter, you matter. Like, it's not a question of if you matter in this world. It's only a question of how you're going to choose to matter, not if you matter. And when people realize that everything they do has an impact on this world and they're here for a reason, it can help them find a greater purpose to continue to go down this path to shine a greater light in the world. And going back to one point you made earlier about this idea of infinity, which can be a really heady topic. When we see the truth of infinity, we're no longer bound by the pressure of time. And time can create fear because we feel we need to get somewhere, or we need to do something, or we need to be where, before time runs out. And when you know that the only true thing about life is that it continues, that it doesn't end, you can take a collective breath, be more present, and because of that, be an even more powerful creator in the moment. Because you're coming from this place of faith and trust and gratitude about your eternal existence. So it's a really big point to make as it relates to understanding infinity.
The wisdom of Howard Falco, his book, Invincible, The Mindset of Infinite Potential and the Secret to Inevitable Success. Howard, one more time, please share with our listeners where they can get all of your books and find out more about you and your wonderful work.
So howardfalco.com is where all my books can be found. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any independent bookstore. Total Mind Sports is the website that I show where I've done what I've done in the world of sports. And then, of course, my Instagram and any other social media. And then I have a foundation called the 8 Wisdom Foundation. The 8 represents not a number, but a symbol for infinity. So the Infinite Wisdom Foundation, which is 8wisdom.org. And you can see what I'm working on to help young people and educate them on self-understanding and self-discovery before they truly go out in the world. They have an understanding how powerful their mind is. So those are really where all my work is.
Howard, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this wonderful wisdom and this very positive outlook on life.
Thank you so much for having me, Victor. I truly enjoyed this conversation, and thanks for everything that you do.
And thank you for joining us on Vox Novus. I'm Victor, the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week.